Good morning. I'm Cheryl Atkinson. Welcome to Full Measure. We begin with for-profit colleges allegedly preying on our military troops. Veterans with benefits provided by your tax dollars who have the desire to build a new life become targets, even given a name by some college recruiters, cash cows. Today, about 300,000 vets get up to $21,000 a year in GI Bill money. In all, 1,800 colleges, many of them for-profits, have received more than 20 billion GI Bill tax dollars. With so many billions in the mix, it's easy to see why some colleges use high pressure and allegedly dishonest tactics. And now taxpayers are about to be on the hook for alleged misconduct by the schools. As a U.S. Marine, Brian Babcock fought on the front lines in Iraq, including the Second Battle of Fallujah in 2004. His post-military plan, police work. He used his GI Bill money to pursue a criminal justice degree at the for-profit college ITT Tech.
ITT Technical Institute, education for the future.
How'd you hear about it?
I saw a commercial on TV that kind of got me interested in them.
And ITT Tech was there, always in the back of my mind.
ITT was definitely a good fit for me after I left the military life.
Babcock says ITT promised that police agencies everywhere would accept the degree. The cost, $70,000, would far exceed his GI Bill grant at the time, but ITT made it easy for Babcock to borrow. He says they even helped him fill out paperwork for student loans. Then, after his third year, a startling discovery.
We applied to 22 or 23 police departments.
And what did they say?
All of them said that they did not recognize ITT's degrees or their credits.
And what thoughts went through your head when you heard this?
I was angry that I'd spent all this money, student loans, and turns out that the degree, if I would have finished there, would have been pretty much worthless.
It's a story told by thousands of vets who attended for-profit colleges where students are more likely to drop out, default on their loans, or graduate in dire debt without a useful degree. Of 8 for-profits that get the most GI Bill funds, 7 have been targets of inquiries for possible violations, including deceptive or misleading recruiting. Together, they received nearly $1 billion tax dollars over 2 school years. One of those companies is DeVry University, where Chris Nywame was hired as the school recruited vets under the new GI Bill. A veteran himself, Nywame was assigned to Team Camo, where he says managers urged the sales team to use high-pressure tactics on troops who sometimes weren't suited for college.
Working in the industry at that time truly reminded me of the film Glengarry Glen Ross.
You close or you hit the bricks.
Well, there's a scene where a corporate sales manager is brought in to improve the performance of the sales floor, played by Alec Baldwin.
They're sitting out there waiting to give you their money. Are you going to take it?
And that was similar at the company.
If Team Camo dared to let veterans suspend class while in combat, like those in the National Guard, Nywame says management called them on the carpet.
The company didn't care. They just wanted to make sure that they stayed in their classes, and so the university could continue to be paid, and they would continue to be on the enrollment.
Even if they were in a combat zone that didn't make sense for them to try to go to college on the computer.
Yes. Management's guiding wisdom was, to be frank, get their ass in class.
Nywame showed us today's sales tactics at work. In a chat on DeVry's website, he asks about costs and benefits, but can't get direct answers.
I can have a representative from our military admissions team reach out to you. It's fairly frustrating that I ask these questions and I can't get answers. Rather, they're trying to sort of tie me in and get me closer so they can work towards selling the school.
DeVry officials declined an on-camera interview, but said DeVry has a long history of serving veterans and military personnel dating back to the 1940s, and we offer quality academics and student services with flexibility to meet their busy schedules. Former Congressman Steve Gunderson leads the Maine National For-Profit College Trade Group.
If anybody has a bad outcome, and certainly if a veteran has a bad outcome, that's a problem, and we want to solve that.
He says for-profits are under assault from opponents and competitors.
I have never before seen a situation where a sector is the target of attacks for ideological reasons. I mean, there simply are people who do not believe the private sector ought to be involved in the design and delivery of education.
Fair enough. But is there any doubt in your mind that some schools have used unfair, unethical, or even dishonest tactics?
There is no doubt in my mind that there are bad schools in every sector of higher education who have engaged in inappropriate conduct for various reasons, whether it be athletics or whether it be admissions or it be something else.
Gunderson says the industry is improving. A Government Accountability Office report found for-profits catering to military students actually beat public schools in one area, higher graduation rates. With billions flowing to for-profits under investigation, President Obama dispatched a warning at Fort Stewart Army Base about any for-profits that may be preying on the troops.
It's not right. They're trying to swindle and hoodwink you. They don't care about you, they care about the cash.
But as federal scrutiny surged, the industry has countered with Washington lobbyists and campaign cash. Since 2010, for-profit colleges have poured nearly $10 million into campaign contributions and spent $41 million on lobbying, according to the Center for Responsive Politics.
That's how you really win friends and influence people on Capitol Hill. The for-profit colleges and universities have friends in high places.
That implies some members of Congress, you think, are bought and paid for on this issue.
I would say this, they are influenced by it.
Senator Dick Durbin has pushed one bill after another to fight for-profit college fraud, only to see the bills get watered down and voted down.
If these schools that are enticing kids into loans for educations that are worthless had some, quote, skin in the game, some responsibility for default, they'd think twice about it, but they don't. They could care less.
It turns out taxpayers have the most skin in the game. In June, the federal government said it will forgive loans for students at Corinthian College, putting taxpayers on the hook for up to $3.5 billion. Corinthian shut down in May amid fraud accusations, which the company denied. And the feds may wipe out loans at other problematic colleges. In May, the federal government charged Babcock's alma mater, ITT Tech, with fraud, alleging it concealed financial information from investors. ITT is fighting the charges but declined our interview request. Gunderson says he doubts Babcock's ITT degree would have really been useless.
I am willing to say that if he graduated from an accredited criminal justice program, there are many police agencies that would hire him. Maybe not the one that he wanted to go to, but there are many that will, and evidence all across the country shows that.
Babcock gave up on the ITT degree and his dream of police work. Instead, he's focused on warning other vets and working to pay down his $40,000 student loan debt.
I think it's a shame that they prey on men and women that volunteered to protect this country and that earned a benefit with their service, and then ITT and the other for-profit schools are just trying to take that.
The Defense Department recently banned the University of Phoenix from enrolling new service members, alleging a pattern of violating policies designed to protect military students. Senator Durbin says ITT is now facing investigations by the Justice Department and 18 attorneys general. We begin with the story of a whistleblower imprisoned by one federal agency but rewarded by another beyond his wildest dreams. Brad Birkenfeld's incredible tale begins in 2007 when he turned evidence against one of the biggest and most secretive banks in the world. Still, he insists the real scandal isn't what happened to him, it's what happened to U.S. taxpayers.
My government, the Department of Justice, put me in jail, and my government, the Internal Revenue Service, paid me the largest award in U.S. history.
As a manager at Switzerland's largest bank, UBS, Bradley Birkenfeld found himself part of a massive, long-standing scheme to help wealthy Americans evade taxes.
There were 19,000 offshore illegal accounts with $20 billion in assets.
Of Americans?
Only of Americans. This was the American desk, and it was based out of Lugano, Geneva, and Zurich.
In 2007, he decided to blow the whistle, the first banker ever to break open the legendary Swiss bank secrecy.
They didn't find me. I sought out the DOJ. the IRS, the SEC, and the U.S. Senate back in 2007. And the problem here is that when I gave them this information, they were hostile towards me at the DOJ from day one.
Birkenfeld suspects hostility from DOJ, the Department of Justice, had something to do with UBS's powerful connections. The bank was a top donor to then-President George W. Bush.
They had over $1 trillion in assets. So you can imagine they had offices worldwide. They had a lot of political influence, and they hired politicians to help them, whether it was for marketing or for representation or for lecturing or what have you.
And there were also politically influential UBS clients referred to as PEPs.
PEPs are politically exposed people. We had a very secretive desk in Zurich in which no one really knows who those account holders were. But we did have a dedicated desk because I knew the gentleman there, and they handled accounts directly out of Washington, D.C.
Birkenfeld says he was stunned when DOJ didn't pursue the first name he turned over of the biggest tax evader he knew about, a foreigner who lived in a multi-million-dollar New York condo and Birkenfeld claims was involved in terrorist financing.
He had made illegal oil sales with Saddam Hussein. He had over $400 million in numbered accounts that were set up for decades. He had his own private phone into my boss's office that only he would call in on.
Birkenfeld says a DOJ attorney told him they simply weren't interested in non-Americans. The agency declined comment for this report. It turns out DOJ was interested in prosecuting Birkenfeld in the tax scheme. They used evidence he provided to build a case against him. You did serve time.
Oh, I did. Yes, I did serve time.
While he, the whistleblower, was prosecuted, the government worked behind closed doors to cut a deal with his former employer, UBS, which was one of President Obama's top donors. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton took the lead in negotiations with the Swiss foreign minister. Do you think it was unusual that the Secretary of State at the time, Hillary Clinton, intervened in this giant criminal case?
She has no right in getting involved in an international criminal investigation.
And then, in July 2009,
there has been an agreement reached.
The bank agreed to pay a settlement of $780 million. Birkenfeld calls it a sweetheart deal for UBS because it was about $1 billion less than the profit UBS made from the illegal accounts. What's more, UBS would only have to give up 4,450 tax evaders out of 19,000. There was no explanation as to who decided which names were divulged and which ones got conveniently buried.
Why wouldn't you get all of the names?
In essence, the secrecy has been allowed to continue instead of being stopped.
Well, that's precisely it. It's a continuation of Swiss bank secrecy, American style. This was not a real investigation. This was to cover up for the rich and powerful people in this country, the millionaires and billionaires and politicians who had accounts in Switzerland.
Clinton, the Justice Department, and State Department declined comment for this report. Earlier, Clinton defended the deal by saying the Swiss helped the U.S. on many difficult diplomatic fronts, including in Iran and Turkey. Not long after the deal was sealed, President Obama was seen enjoying a round of golf with UBS Chairman for the Americas, Robert Wolf. Wolf told us he didn't know about the deal beforehand, and the U.S. businesses he managed were not under investigation. He went on to become one of Obama's biggest campaign donation bundlers in 2012. And UBS donations to the Clinton Foundation skyrocketed after Hillary helped broker the deal, according to the Wall Street Journal. A Clinton campaign spokesman told the Journal that any suggestions that Clinton was driven by anything but what's in America's best interest would be false, period.
We still don't know who the PEPs were. They should be made public to the American public so they can see who was breaking the law. Most of the other people in this country pay their taxes, but these people had millions, if not billions, offshore. So why is it that those names aren't made public?
There's one final twist to the story. Whistleblowers are entitled to up to 30% of the money collected from tax evaders. With Birkenfeld's evidence, the IRS was able to recoup $5 billion. 1 month after he got out of prison, he got the largest IRS award ever. How much money?
It was $104 million.
Punished as a villain, yet rewarded as a hero. He says Americans have good reason to wonder what powerful names are among the thousands kept secret in the UBS deal.
We were well aware of many people that had accounts at UBS that were given to political parties. That was a fact. But yet, because it was a numbered account in Switzerland, no one ever thought they'd be exposed. So that's very, very dangerous and something that they don't want to have come out.
Was it worth it to you to expose the practices that you did to get the $100 million plus, but also to spend years in prison?
I think I did it out of courage and doing the right thing for my country, and I think people see that. And certainly I did go to prison for 2.5 years, but the vindication of getting the $104 million really makes me smile, because what it does is sends a message to the DOJ: I beat the system, and I beat you. And now the American people can decide who is right and who is wrong.
A few footnotes. Yes, Birkenfeld got one big check. Yes, they took out taxes, about $31 million. And his first purchases were 2 Porsches. Alicia Dabney fought to get one of the toughest jobs around as a firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service. When she felt threatened at work, another battle began inside a federal agency that should be setting the standard for fair treatment. We want to caution you, this report includes some strong language.
I was really lost and upset at what I had did and the fact that I had committed a crime and, you know, what I had done to my family.
Alicia Dabney's crime was welfare fraud. At the time, she was a young mother of 3 living on an Indian reservation and caring for her husband, who'd been seriously injured in a suicide attempt. When she went back to work, she got caught collecting welfare she was no longer entitled to. She pled guilty and focused on a plan to pay the money back.
I said, firefighters, they work hard, they make good money, and I've always wanted to be one, so I'm going to go sign up and just push through it.
So in 2010, at age 27, Dabney landed her dream job as a firefighter with the Forest Service under the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Working fires like this one in New Mexico, Dabney was prepared for life or death situations. But she was unprepared for the hostility she faced back at the station in California's Region 5, covering 20 million acres in the Pacific Southwest.
There was 3 females, and then within a month, 1 had quit, and then within 2 or 3 months, 1 was ran out for filing a sexual harassment claim, and then pretty soon it was only me. So then they, just started torturing me. This frat boy attitude and the bullying and being humiliated, being called fat, also being called a whore, and it just drove me up the wall. I couldn't take it.
Do you think they were trying to be playful when they would call you these names?
No, it's part of the culture.
Dabney didn't know it then, but Region 5, the Forest Service, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture all had sordid histories of civil rights violations and discrimination dating back decades. Corrective actions ordered over the years didn't prevent Dabney from getting singled out, she says, as a Mexican Native American and a woman.
One of my captains was forcing me to tell him when I started my menstrual periods.
How did you report this? What did you do?
Every month when I would start my menstrual cycle, I would go in there and I would cover my face with my hands and just say, I started my period, and be humiliated.
Why do you think he was doing that?
I don't know his motives other than I just think he's sick, to be honest.
Dabney lodged multiple equal employment opportunity claims and complained to the Inspector General and Office of Special Counsel. For example, she alleged that on the road, she was forced to urinate in view of her male colleagues, that they got opportunities she was denied, that a supervisor once sat and bounced on her neck when she was bent over. She says the offenders were sometimes disciplined but not fired, and the bullying got worse. In early 2011, Dabney attended a firefighter training conference where phone numbers were given out on a list.
In the middle of the night, I get a phone call.
She saved the recorded message.
Alicia, it's me, sweetie, baby girl. My half stacked. I'm ready to go. I'm in room 203. I'm totally ready to hang out, baby girl. Just give me a call back. I hope you're all wet like I am, baby girl.
You could hear a ton of guys laughing in the background. So it's some type of ha ha ha, I don't know. It's not like this guy liked me and wanted to hang out with me. He was trying to humiliate me, of course.
When you hear Alicia Dabney's story, what's your take on her case?
The management infrastructure of USDA is such as that it encourages this kind of frat boy, this atmosphere.
Michael McRae experienced the culture at USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, firsthand. A manager there in the 90s, he exposed fraud worth millions of tax dollars in a program for poor communities.
Forged checks, some really outrageous stuff that we wound up going to the OIG, the Inspector General, and we even notified the President's Initiative on Race, trying to get them some help.
Instead of help, McRae says he got targeted for being a minority who also blew the whistle and lost his job. In 1995, he began filing a series of discrimination and retaliation claims, which by law must be investigated within 6 months. What was the outcome of your complaints?
My complaints have never been processed to completion.
From 1990s?
From 1990s. I had testimony, corroboration, documentation. I had a case that shouldn't have taken 20 minutes that has taken 20 years.
How big is this problem of long-standing backlogs on civil rights complaints?
It's huge. It's tremendous.
Truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
In 2009, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack, shown here at his confirmation hearing, acknowledged there were 3,000 languishing civil rights claims at USDA and promised to change the culture.
Among the most intractable challenges facing the new Secretary of Agriculture is the intolerable and inexcusable state of civil rights in USDA's agricultural programs and for USDA employees.
Discrimination in any form will not be tolerated in this department.
But 2 years after that testimony, Dabney says her situation was tolerated. A coalition of minority employees provided Vilsack with accounts from Dabney and other women and minorities. They even tried writing Mrs. Vilsack, Mrs. Obama, and Obama advisor Valerie Jarrett, hoping the women might be moved to act. The coalition says administration officials engaged and promised help, but the abuses continued. Just a few months later came what Dabney says was her lowest point with the Forest Service. In August of 2011, she was attending a training conference when she says a supervisor asked to borrow some work supplies at the hotel.
So I knock on the door and he opens it and he just grabs me in a chokehold and then flings me on the bed. And I'm literally just scared. I didn't know what he was doing. And he starts to say, Alicia, let's just cuddle, let's hang out, let's be together. And I was like, no, you're my boss. Please don't do this right now. And he just kept getting tighter and tighter. And I just, started saying, please don't do this to me right now. And so I had to talk him down, reminding him, you're my boss. You don't want to do this to me right now. Please let go of me. And so when I started crying, then he finally, let go of me.
She says she reported the incident to her supervisor and multiple investigative bodies, but suffered more reprisal. It turns out the problems with discrimination complaints go to high levels of the Department of Agriculture. That's according to a recent investigation by a federal watchdog agency, the Office of Special Counsel. It found hundreds of claims filed against senior managers in the very division that's supposed to enforce civil rights laws, the Department of Agriculture Office of the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights. What's more, from 2010 to 2013, 81% of complaints filed against USDA senior managers were not acted on in a timely manner. The USDA told us it's since fixed that particular problem. The Obama administration denied our interview requests, but a spokesman said the agency inherited serious issues. Over the past 6 years, we have corrected past errors, learned from mistakes, and charted a stronger path for the future where all Americans are treated with dignity and respect. McRae, who is an attorney, has filed a class action suit on behalf of the 3,000 people whose discrimination claims remained unprocessed in 2009.
There's no accountability, even in cases where, discrimination has been proven. If you're a manager, you don't even have to pay for your defense because it's going to be the agency's attorneys are going to, they're going to be your attorneys.
And if there are any fines,
the Justice Department pays.
Well, taxpayers pay.
Well, absolutely. But so from the manager's point of view, there's no cost to them. There's zero accountability.
As for Dabney, the Department of Agriculture admitted no fault, but paid her a confidential settlement that included the alleged hotel assault with the condition she never worked there again.
I think it's especially corrosive for someone like Alicia Dabney, who's on the front line in harm's way. I mean, it's bad enough if you're on a desk job, but if you're getting, if people are playing with you and you're out fighting fires, your equipment, they're not responding, I mean, you could die.
I don't know how to get justice other than letting America know, letting people know, like this has happened to me, but it doesn't have to continue to happen to others.
Dabney has repaid the money she stole from the welfare fraud years ago, and a judge wiped the conviction from her record. Today, she still lives on the Indian reservation with her husband and 3 children and is unemployed. Today, an unbelievable story that sounds more like an episode of Breaking Bad than real life. It takes place at a federal agency under the Commerce Department you probably never heard of, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. Next year's budget will be somewhere around $1 billion. By day, NIST literally sets industry standards for everything from voting machines to computer security. But it's what was going on there at night and how they're allegedly misleading Congress that will have you wondering about their own standards. It was NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that helped solve one of the most notorious crimes of the 20th century, the kidnapping and murder of Charles Lindbergh's son.
The victim of a cruel and fiendish crime, the kidnapper wore heavy woolen socks to disguise his footprints, but the search goes on just the same.
German stowaway Richard Hauptmann was convicted in the case after a ransom note was analyzed by an expert provided by NIST, known back then as the National Bureau of Standards.
Most people think of NIST as a federal laboratory, but its true central mission is to enable innovation.
Today, the 3,000 scientists at NIST establish all kinds of industry standards and measurements, and the agency pretty much flew quietly under the federal radar until last July, when an explosion rocked the Special Projects building. Inside, firefighters found this, an illegal meth drug lab. The only thing more startling than a meth lab in the middle of a federal agency is who was running it, NIST Police Lieutenant Christopher Bartley. He was found on site with burned arms and singed hair. Officer Jones is a NIST police officer who worked with Bartley. He asked us not to use his real name. When you heard about the meth lab incident, what was the reaction that you had and other people on the force?
The emotions were all over the place, from like, well, he finally did something, to you don't believe it, to you expect him to do other things, not actually make meth and blow up a lab.
As a member of Congress, what did you first think when you heard that there was a meth lab operating at a federal agency?
I think my first reaction was total disbelief. You just can't believe this kind of thing would really happen in the real world. It was like it was Halloween or something.
Congressman Lamar Smith heads the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. He says while investigating the meth lab case, his office uncovered an alleged culture of waste, fraud, abuse, and misconduct at NIST Police Services. For example, Smith wrote in a letter to NIST, Officer Bartley allegedly had sexual relations with other NIST employees on agency property in vehicles owned by the government while on official duty. Whistleblowers also provided evidence of alleged rampant overtime fraud on the police force for years that included Bartley.
This particular individual put in for something like 80 hours of overtime over a 2-week period in addition to his regular hours. That just didn't add up.
Smith says the blame may lie with NIST management. He wrote, "It appears agency officials were aware of Mr. Bartley's conduct, but failed to take appropriate disciplinary actions and even selected him as interim chief of police." The question is why?
That individual should not have been there, should not have been hired, should not have been promoted, and that led, unfortunately, to the result, as incredible as it may sound, that you have a police officer normally in charge of enforcing laws, actually breaking laws.
There's no evidence anyone knew specifically about Bartley's meth lab, but Officer Jones says senior managers knew well of his other alleged misconduct, including sexual escapades and overtime fraud, yet promoted him anyway. Bartley's advocates reportedly included NIST Emergency Services Chief Mark Spurrier, and above him, head of facilities Steve Sauber, who supported Bartley despite complaints from the police union.
About the overtime, about the inappropriate behavior.
And the police union told him this before Bartley was appointed as police chief?
Yes, and the members of the police union have actually met with that person about 18 times prior to Bartley taking over.
Spurrier, who oversees the NIST police force and also allegedly backed Bartley's promotion, has his own checkered past. Before NIST, he was number 2 in charge of law enforcement at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. There, his office got caught improperly shredding documents during a probe into corruption. Spurrier was removed from his position, yet then hired to head emergency services at NIST as allegations of waste and misconduct grew. Sauber, Spurrier, and the head of NIST declined our interview requests. A spokesman defended Spurrier's hiring, saying he has appropriate skills and has performed his duties effectively. The spokesman also said NIST takes seriously all allegations of misconduct and takes appropriate disciplinary action when warranted by the evidence. And NIST says the allegations Congressman Smith has asked about are unfounded. But this month, Smith fired off a new letter accusing NIST of repeatedly providing him false and misleading information about the whole scandal.
So it seems to us that there is a major mismanagement problem at the NIST police force.
Another area sure to outrage taxpayers is money spent on, of all things, an emergency response team at the science agency. Was that a relatively expensive proposition?
Yeah, because they would just buy things, items that weren't being needed. We had those ballistic shields with the headlights on it in the window, the camouflage suit that looks like leaves and grass that the snipers put over themselves.
Did you ever have use for that?
No. My own personal opinion in most of the departments was there was no need for an emergency response team at NIST.
A SWAT team that was all dressed up with no place to go. Did they ever have to respond to any events?
We had no events to respond.
And to top it off, police gear worth thousands of dollars may have disappeared.
We're not sure where this stuff is.
They're just missing.
They're missing.
Bartley pled guilty in the meth case and faces up to 20 years in prison. And Smith is left trying to find out why a federal agency that made its name solving crime didn't sniff out a meth lab under its own nose. What does it say in general to the public that there is a federal agency out there they probably never heard of that had this sort of thing going on?
The American taxpayer is going to say, what are you doing with my hard-earned tax dollars? It's supposed to be going to legitimate research, not to cooking meth in an illegal lab that we found out about only because there was an explosion.
Officer Bartley declined our interview request. NIST claims there was no overtime abuse and no missing police equipment. Congressman Smith says NIST has failed to disclose required documents and is improperly trying to keep whistleblowers from providing more information. We'll keep on top of the story.